Yo, what's up? Dr. Swole here, MD, pro physique athlete. Today we're going to be talking about 8 things that pro bodybuilders do that you shouldn't. In a lot of things in life, it makes sense for us to look for the people who are the most successful in that field and copy what they're doing. But especially in bodybuilding, there are some confounding factors here. So just because a pro bodybuilder or your favorite fitness influencer is doing something doesn't mean that you should as well. And today we'll be talking about some of those things when it comes to hypertrophy. Note that some of these are going to be points that I disagree with, but not all of them are necessarily going to be mistakes. There are certain practices that pros use that do work for them, they just probably won't work for you. First one we're going to talk about today is muscle confusion. There is a lot of misunderstanding out there where you'll see people in the gym switching up their workouts every time. This is not ideal for the most part. You really want to be sticking to a consistent program that you progressively overload over time. It's the progressive adaptations you make over prolonged exposure to that stimulus that actually makes you grow. And when you switch up your workout routine, it takes a few weeks or at least a few workouts to even get acclimatized to it. Usually in your first few weeks, a lot of those strength gains are actually neural adaptations. So for example, if you pick up a new variation of a machine bench press and you're able to increase 20 pounds on that over a month, that doesn't necessarily mean you gained a lot of muscle. Especially when starting a new movement or one that you haven't used for a while, a lot of those initial gains are going to be technique adaptations. Now I will caveat this by saying that highly advanced athletes may need to change up their training routine more often. This is because since they're able to get really strong on a certain movement if they keep at it, at some point they get so strong in that movement that it costs them a lot of fatigue. And the stimulus to fatigue ratio is no longer worthwhile. For example, a pro bodybuilder, if they kept going at back squats, might be able to squat 5 or 6 plates over time. But hitting those kinds of weights for reps causes a lot of fatigue. And at an advanced level, this will detract from that bodybuilder's ability to accumulate effective volume in general. Another caveat I wanted to point out is that an advanced bodybuilder will have very good technical adaptations already built. So they may be able to switch up exercises more often, but bypass that initial technique building phase. Still, even for the most advanced bodybuilders, I wouldn't recommend switching up your routine more than once a mesocycle. And for most athletes, you don't start to see an adaptation from the stimulus until a few months in. The next thing that some pro bodybuilders do that you shouldn't is prioritizing isolation work. You'll see a lot of IFBB pros going to great lengths to really isolate the target muscle. This often involves using more machines. I actually don't necessarily see this as a mistake. It's just something that really applies more to highly advanced athletes. At a more beginner level, you really want to be focusing on your main compound movements because these involve the most muscle mass and will give you the most bang for your buck. Things like heavy squat, deadlift, and free weight row variations are going to involve a lot of global stimulus. Plus, the strength you develop on these early on will jumpstart your ability to apply mechanical tension later on. But for a more advanced athlete, you generate a lot of fatigue with these movements, and at some point fatigue will become a limiting factor. In fact, at an advanced level, I think managing fatigue and avoiding injury are the main obstacles that stop people from realizing their ultimate genetic potential. An example here might be a barbell row versus a chest-supported row. As a beginner or intermediate, barbell or T-bar rows are going to be great because they involve a lot of muscle mass and also train your erector spining. But at an advanced level, say if you're rowing 2 or 3 plates, you generate so much fatigue with that you might be better off using the chest-supported row, where you can still get a great stimulus for your lats, but you're not driving yourself into the ground. Okay, the next thing that a lot of pro bodybuilders do that you should think twice about is ultra high training intensity. Not all pros do this, but ultra high intensities have been very popular in bodybuilding culture. And I think a lot of this goes with a psychological mentality that's prized by bodybuilders. I think the go hard or go home mentality actually carries over into a lot of aspects in life and is one reason why athletes are successful in general. But I do think that the extreme levels of training intensity does come at a cost of overall efficiency. When you're always training at failure and beyond failure, you generate so much fatigue with this that it actually becomes disproportionate and you'll sacrifice the amount of productive volume you're able to produce. Now, according to the research we have, you're probably going to be okay as long as you're trained to about 4 reps in reserve or harder. As you know, I typically actually favor the higher intensity end of that range, about 1 to 2 reps in reserve for the most part. And I do think it is valuable to go to failure on a regular basis, but I do think that the ultra high intensity, low volume approach isn't going to be ideal for a lot of people. If you have the time, you're probably better served by just being a little bit more careful around failure and doing a little bit more volume. Now I put an asterisk by this point because I do note that a very high training intensity, low volume approach does work if you're short on time. If you're only training 2 or 3 times per week or less, it actually makes sense to train with high intensities. This is because recovery isn't an issue because you're just not doing that much. So in that case, you really want to squeeze the most out of every set. Okay, the next thing that some pro bodybuilders do that you shouldn't is really fast rates of weight gain. You'll see a lot of pro bodybuilders talking about gaining weight at rapid rates when they're bulking. There are two components to this. So to a large degree, they actually can bulk at a faster rate. As you know, my recommendation is to go with a lean bulking approach. So about 1 to 1.5% of your body weight gained per month for beginners and 0.5 to 1% of your body weight gained per month for intermediate to advanced athletes. Beyond these rates of gain, you're probably not going to be gaining much more muscle, and any excess weight is just going to be fat. But for someone who's on performance enhancing drugs, they may be able to push this envelope. Now, the other thing to point out is that when people are on performance enhancing drugs, they get a lot of water weight that actually clouds the picture. So some of the weight gain they'll talk about actually comes from changes in water. A lot of people actually like dirty bulking because it actually makes them look bigger in clothes. But you want to be careful about this. You can store a lot of fat even in the muscle. So even though it may look like your arms are getting a lot bigger, a lot of that is going to be fat. Number 5 on the list of things that pro bodybuilders do that you shouldn't includes fast rates of loss. You'll see that a lot of IFBB pros actually lose a lot of weight during contest prep. And the points here are actually similar to the last one with bulking. With performance enhancing drugs, you're able to lose fat at a faster rate while maintaining or continuing to build muscle. So in fact, a lot of pros actually are able to build muscle and lose fat at the same time, even when in contest prep, because of their drug regimen. For most advanced natural bodybuilders who are competing, you're not actually able to do this, and you won't actually be building muscle in contest prep when you're that lean. So be careful about trying to go for really rapid rates of loss, particularly more than about 1.5% of your body weight per week, or 2% if you're obese, because beyond this, you're gonna start losing muscle. And since it's much harder to build muscle than it is to lose fat, any muscle lost is going to cost you a lot of ground in terms of time towards your dream physique. The other point here is water weight as well. Some of the weight changes pro bodybuilders talk about will come from fluctuations in water. If you're looking for inspiration on actual numbers in terms of weight changes for naturals, make sure you're looking at natural bodybuilders. For example, when you see the advanced bodybuilders on my podcast, they actually have pretty conservative rates of gain and loss. So make sure you know who you're looking to for information. Number 6 on the list of things that pro bodybuilders do that you shouldn't is only having pump workouts. You'll see that there's some bodybuilders out there who exclusively use lighter weights and higher rep ranges. They talk about focusing on the pump and really focusing on getting a good squeeze on the target muscle. Now, in general, having some light, high rep work actually is beneficial for hypertrophy. Remember, there are 3 main avenues for muscle growth: mechanical tension, metabolic stress, and muscle damage. But out of the 3, mechanical tension is going to be your biggest player. So in general, you do really want to be focusing on progressive overload. I do recommend having some light, more pump type work in your program, but this is typically the minority. One thing I want to point out about pro bodybuilders is they actually have to be really careful about the weights they use because of tendon injuries. When people are on anabolic steroids, they grow muscle so quickly that the muscle growth actually outstrips the ability of the tendon to grow. So what ends up happening is they have really strong muscles, but tendons that aren't proportionally as strong. So this is why you see these huge bicep and quad tendon tears in pro bodybuilders. In medicine, we say that when we see someone coming into the emergency department and they've torn both of their quad tendons working out, it's almost certain that they're using steroids. So what pros do at this level is they control the amount of weight they use, and they aim to use light weights with more higher rep pump style training. The other thing is that pros have such good mind-muscle connections that they're able to get a lot out of relatively little weight. Now, I will note that as you become more advanced, you're going to end up allocating more work towards metabolite type training because of those chronic tendon issues. When I was an intermediate, I remember going in to do workouts where I did 8x5 of heavy squats. At this point, I wouldn't be able to do this because of chronic joint and tendon pains. So I have found that as I become more advanced, I've allocated more sets towards higher rep work. Note that this doesn't necessarily mean it's super light, it just means it's relatively light for the athlete. Okay, number 7 on the list of things that pro bodybuilders do that you shouldn't is using a lot of supplements. We won't go into performance enhancing supplements here because that's not the aim of my channel. We're all about natural hypertrophy here. But even beyond those, you'll see pro bodybuilders taking a lot of supplements in general. Supplements are a very small slice of the pie when it comes to hypertrophy, something on the order of like a couple percent. You're much better off spending your energy improving your training, diet, and recovery. The issue here is that a lot of pro bodybuilders are sponsored by supplement companies, and a lot of the money in the fitness industry does come from selling supplements. So since these bodybuilders are sponsored, they get supplements for free, and they're expected to use them and show them off on their social media. You have to realize that those supplements aren't what the bodybuilders actually use to get to where they are now. Most supplements out there are a waste of money, so I'd recommend saving your time and attention and instead upgrade your training and nutrition knowledge. You'll see a lot of pro bodybuilders staying shredded year round, and this is something I would not recommend to naturals. Often at a high level, these bodybuilders are competing every year, and this usually isn't ideal for a natural. Since a lot of these bodybuilders have the support of performance enhancing supplements, they're able to maintain or continue to build muscle even during contest prep when they're really lean. But as a natural, when you enter those really low body fat percentages, like lower than around 8 to 10% for men or something like 15 to 18% for women, you start running into disruptions in your hormone production. Things like your thyroid and testosterone really drop. And this means that when you're really lean, you're not going to be able to build muscle properly. If you are really trying to get shredded, say for a competition or a photo shoot, you want to aim to touch down in conditioning for that event, but not necessarily staying shredded much longer. You're going to do best by maximizing the amount of time you spend in a surplus. Being in a calorie surplus is very favorable for muscle growth. So as an advanced tip, I would recommend to maximize your bulk to cut ratio. Basically, you want to be spending as much time bulking as compared to cutting. For example, for myself, I spend around 8 months bulking for 3 weeks of cutting. As a beginner, your bulk to cut ratio won't necessarily be that big, but I'd recommend aiming for at least 4 to 1. If you want to learn more about the bulk to cut ratio and other advanced programming strategies, check out my book, Advanced Hypertrophy Periodization, where I really go into the nuts and bolts of advanced hypertrophy programming. If you are a natural, I'd recommend checking out this video, 10 Harsh Truths of Natural Bodybuilding, where I go into some of the harsh realities of this sport as a natural, and things that you should be aware of so you're not misled by fitness influencers. Make sure you continue to level up your hypertrophy knowledge by subscribing to the channel, and we'll see you next time.